Okay, welcome everybody. My name is Sreepathi Pai, and I'm a professor in the computer science department at Rochester. And today, as part of the full spectrum series, I'll be talking about the computer science program for undergraduates at Rochester. If you have questions, please put them in the chat. Because of audio issues, I cannot hear you right now. So the undergraduate program at Rochester is primarily 2 degrees as a major, the computer science major, a BS in computer science, and a BA in computer science. We also offer a minor in computer science. But today I'll focus on CS as a major, okay? And in the major, the first question most students have is, what is the difference between a BS in computer science and a BA in computer science? The way we think about this is that the BS in computer science gives you a more grounding in computer science if that's your primary interest. And it requires more courses for completion. The BA in computer science is built for flexibility. It has fewer required courses, and the idea there is that if you're doing a double major, or you want to do CS plus X, then a BA in computer science might be more appropriate. So what is computer science? In a sense, the word science is in the name. But if you look at the curriculum, you might find that some parts of it are math, some parts of it are science, and some parts of it are engineering. So which of it is it? And as I kind of hinted, it's all 3, but the amount of math, science, and engineering varies in the parts of computer science, as I will talk about. So at Rochester, it is best to understand computer science as 3 big areas: theory, systems, and artificial intelligence and human-computer interaction, or what we call AI and HCI, which is essentially a form of application of computer systems. And I'll tell you why we consider it part of computer science today. So let's begin with the foundations of computer science, which is theory. In 1900, the mathematician Hilbert roughly asked this question: can we write mathematical proofs mechanically, using a fixed recipe-like procedure? So just like you use recipes to, make dishes, could you follow a recipe and automatically write a mathematical proof? If you've written mathematical proofs, you know that there is no fixed recipe-like procedure, but Hilbert wanted to ask if that was always the case. Okay, was there some procedure that we didn't know about that could be used to make writing math proofs extremely simple? And Hilbert was very optimistic. He assumed there was such a procedure, we just didn't know about it. Unfortunately for Hilbert, in 1931, the logician Gödel said no, there is no such procedure to automatically write proofs. So you have to, unfortunately, figure out a proof on your own every time. In 1936, Alan Turing, one of the earliest computer scientists, actually showed a stronger result, that there are problems that machines cannot solve. And that is typically taken to be the beginning of computer science because it set the boundaries. There are things you can do and there are things you cannot do with machines. And that leads to one of the fundamental topics in computer science theory, which is the computability of problems. So if you have problems, you can now put them into 2 classes: problems that can't be solved by machine, and problems that can be solved by machine. And we use technical terms for them. Undecidable are problems are those that cannot be solved by machine, and decidable problems are those that can be solved by machine. Perhaps, unfortunately, a lot of interesting problems are in the undecidable category. And we have to be aware of that because it's extremely common that a problem you set out to solve by a computer might accidentally turn out to be undecidable. So you can't really solve it. But even if a problem is decidable, that is, it can be solved by a machine, it turns out that problems are richer than we actually imagined. So to understand that, let's take a slight tour of a subject in theory called computational complexity. I have two problems here. On my left is a list of names, and on my right is a Sudoku grid. You know, the game where you have to fill each element, blank element, with a number such that all the rows and columns contain the numbers from 1 to 9. And each square within the Sudoku, each grid of 3 by 3 also contains the numbers 1 to 9. Now, I'm going to ask you to do two things. The first is to take the list of names and arrange them in order of last name. Okay. And I think if you are trying to do this, you should be done by now. It's pretty easy. Now I'm going to ask you to do the other thing. Go solve the Sudoku. Okay. And I do not have enough time today to wait for you to solve that. Some of you may actually solve this. But so this kind of gives some insight into the difficulty or complexity of problems, which is a central topic in computer science. That some problems are easy and some problems are hard. And we want to kind of understand why. So here is the list, on the next line that is sorted by last name. But if you solve the Sudoku, and I looked up the solution for this, this is the solution for the Sudoku problem. There is another property which should become immediately apparent to you. That if somebody gives you a solution to this problem, the Sudoku problem, you can check it very quickly. So Sudoku has a property that finding a solution is hard, but once you find a solution, it's very easy to verify. Okay, this turns out to be a defining characteristic of a class of problems. So the first class of problems that computer scientists kind of think about is what we call the P class. These are problems that can be solved easily. Problems like sorting a list or searching a list fall in this category. Now, the NP class are the class of problems whose solutions are hard to find, but which can be verified easily. As you have seen, Sudoku is such a problem. Packing a suitcase or packing your luggage using the fewest number of suitcases is also a hard problem, in case you wanted to know. If you want to find the shortest route that visits a set of cities, that's also a very hard problem in the computer science sense. We call it the traveling salesperson problem, or TSP for short. One of the biggest open questions in computer science theory is whether the class of problems that can be solved easily, P, is the same as the class of problems whose solutions are hard to find but can be verified easily, that is NP. Our intuition is no, P not equals to NP, but we don't have a proof. It's an open question whether P equals NP or P not equals NP. And if you can find a proof, either direction, and students in CS 280 have a lot of fun trying to disprove existing proofs from people all around the world, because there's a $1 million prize for this question. Okay, and if you show that P equals to NP, it would imply a universe is not as interesting as it is. Okay, so that's one of the central topics of computer science theory, understanding the complexity of problems. Now, hard problems are not necessarily a bad thing. You can construct games out of them, like Sudoku. Every time you go on the internet and you visit a secure website, your computer is solving a hard problem so that other people can't eavesdrop on what you're doing. So people have learned to take advantage of hard problems as well. But that's all I'm going to talk about computer science theory. If you're interested in computer science hard problems, there's a very nice short article on Quanta called A Short Guide to Hard Problems. And you can see that not only is the classes P and NP there, but there are many other classes, BPP, BQP, PH, PSpace, Xtime, and so on, which all have problems with differing characteristics. Okay, so at this time, I'm going to conclude my exploration of CS theory and move into CS systems. But if there are any questions, I could take them.
One of the questions that we had received before was in regard to software versus hardware, in terms of if somebody is more theoretical, do you think that they should get into computer science or they should do electrical and computer engineering?
If they're theoretical, and so the question is, if somebody is theoretical, should they get into computer science or electrical and computer engineering? At first glance, I would suggest computer science, but there's a very nice connection between computer engineering and computer science. And that's what I'll talk about in systems, which is also, about software and hardware. But it is possible in computer science theory to do only math and never even use a computer. Just use a blackboard and chalk, okay? Because that's the nature of computer science theory. Although most computer science theorists obviously use a computer, okay? But it is indeed one of the most mathematical of our field. So let me now move on to systems, which is about essentially bringing computing to life. Okay, so it's very nice that we have all these problems and that we can show which problems are hard and so on. But what you really want is a machine that plays cat videos, right? And things like that. So to bring that whole thing to being, you need systems. What we call computer systems. And one view of computer systems is that at the very bottom, you have sand, the ordinary sand, from which you will build a chip. And to build a chip, you will require people from optics and metallurgy to really collaborate. And that chip contains circuits. And those circuits are designed by people in computer engineering. Okay. That's where we have a nice connection with computer engineering. So computer engineering is essentially everything from computer architecture on this list and below to circuits, okay? Computer architecture is a subject that is shared by both computer engineering and computer scientists. And I'll talk a little bit more about all these other subjects that you see over here, which is computer architecture, compilers, operating systems, and compiler networks, which are all the essential parts of bringing a computer system to life. So what is the central problem that computer systems people try to solve? Well, they're trying to construct a digital universe. And what is the problem there? Well, all we have are zeros and ones. That's bits. Okay, and from those bits, we must construct everything. Data from videos to music to programs to cat videos, everything is ultimately zeros and ones. And computer organization is the part of computer science that lays down the principles for constructing computers out of zeros and ones. We begin with that. So we say, How do we represent integers? How do we represent real numbers? How do we encode things like instructions to a computer and so on? Once we have the organization, we actually have to build it. And computer architecture is the part of computer science that says, okay, we have 1 billion transistors that the computer engineers are giving us. What should we do with those 1 billion transistors? So in front of you is what we call a floor plan for a chip. And this is a Samsung Exynos chip. So it's a chip that you'll find in your mobile phones. And it looks very much like the floor plan of a house, right? So you have one part of it at the top left corner marked FPU, which is the floating point unit, where you perform all your scientific calculations. You have, other parts of it which, do various other things. So LS, for example, is the part that loads data. All of this will make a lot more sense to you if you take a computer architecture course. But if you just want to learn about the joy and the pain of building a new processor, there is this very famous book, a Pulitzer Prize winning book by a very famous author, Tracy Kidder, called The Soul of a New Machine, that talks about a little company that's trying to build a new processor, I think in the 70s or 80s. Okay, so it's a little bit dated, but it kind of gives you a very nice bird's eye view of how to design processors. So once you have a processor, the next step is programs. You need software to run on that hardware so that you can get it to do useful work. And computer processors are fairly basic. They don't understand all the nice high-level programming languages that you use, like Python or something like that. They must be translated to a very, very basic language called assembly language. And on the right, you see that assembly language, which has instructions like push, move, XOR, call, pop, ret. Those are all instructions that a processor understands. On the left-hand side, you have the actual program which you write as a programmer. And another program called a compiler takes what you write and converts it to what the computer can understand. And they help save you a lot of time. So that's compilers. And they are, the second kind of, the first piece of software that you typically write to make a computer usable by everybody else. Once you have a processor and a compiler, to make a system usable by actual people, not just computer scientists, you need an operating system. And an operating system is a piece of software that serves many purposes. There are 3 popular operating systems: Windows, Mac OS, and Linux, my personal favorite. And each one of them does similar things. They protect programs from each other. So when one program crashes, it doesn't affect everything else. It ensures that your files are all safe from different programs. It enforces permissions and all that. So the operating system is an essential part of any computer if you want to use it for any serious work. You usually don't even know it's there as it's working, but it's a very highly complicated piece of software. And in CS, we'll teach you how to actually write your own operating system. The final essential part, especially in today's computing world, is computer networks. This is a picture of the internet, actually a part of the internet, of machines that are connected to each other. I'm pretty sure they don't glow like in the picture, but they're connected. And when you connect computers, you can actually get a system that is more than the sum of its parts. So 2 computers connected to each other usually end up being a lot more useful than 2 separate computers. And computer networks is all about how you can get computers to talk to each other the languages they use to talk to each other, and how to deal with failures when another computer you're talking to goes away, and so on and so forth. So that's my quick tour of systems along the most essential parts of systems. So if there are questions, I'll take them before moving into AI and HCI.
One of the questions we had from a prospective family was getting exposure to this before they get here. How do they best understand the essential parts if they haven't been taught in a class? What resources should they seek out?
Okay, so the question is, what pre-college experiences can help in, joining computer science? There are two answers to this. Any experience helps. So if you've used a computer and programmed it in school, that's very helpful. However, our department emphasizes that we do not want necessarily people with prior experience. We have structured our program in such a way that students without prior experience get that experience in their first year here by taking, for example, 161. Students who have experience will usually start with 171, which is the next course in the sequence. So it should all be good. Okay. The important thing to realize is that the advantage that some students have by being exposed to prior material kind of goes away by the time they're in the second year. The material is complicated. And so everybody quickly reaches the same level of expertise. Okay, so it's not a handicap if you don't have any experience with computer science before, but it might make you more comfortable. That's just. But by your second year, I think all of the students are pretty much on the same level playing field. Okay, so let me go into the final part of my talk to talk about these fields called AI and HCI, both of which are fairly famous these days, especially AI. So artificial intelligence started somewhere in the 1950s, once we had electronic computers, and people started wondering, can we make computers think like humans? Can we construct intelligent machines for some definition of intelligence? And there was a lot of activity from that point onwards. And if you read science fiction, you know that in 2001, we should have a machine like HAL, the computer in 2001, A Space Odyssey, that was intelligent. But what we got instead in 2010 was Siri, which is magical, but unlikely to be defined as intelligent. Okay, but still fairly useful. And that kind of is the view of AI. There are these two facets of AI. The first one is symbolic reasoning, where we want to think like using logic, by learning knowledge and so on. And that was a huge way of thinking about how to make computers intelligent. But these days, what is actually more successful, Siri, for example, is really successful not because the program that Siri uses logic or knowledge, but because it has learned from data. So it has looked at a lot of data and it has learned from it in a field called machine learning. And for example, when Google shows you a CAPTCHA on the internet and asks you to mark all the crosswalks, you're actually training an AI by giving it data that, hey, a crosswalk looks like this. So the next time the AI looks at a picture of a crosswalk, it knows because you've trained it. Okay. So that's essentially one part of AI, which is machine learning, where you give a lot of data and the algorithms learn from that data. It's turned out to be hugely successful these days. because there's now a lot of data available from people, and there are computers now fast enough to process all that data, the large amounts of data. But the pendulum keeps swinging from machine learning to symbolic reasoning to machine learning and back again. In the department, we study a number of applications of AI. The department is extremely strong in a field called natural language processing, which is about getting computers to understand human language. Okay, so something like Siri, for example. We have had decades-long research programs on this problem. More recently, we have professors who analyze Twitter for social trends. We have professors who are translating human languages between human languages. We have professors who have moved on from text, that is natural language processing and speech, to video and audio understanding as well. Like what is happening in a video, or what is the audio about, and things like that. So you can explore some of these subjects here. The other subject, which is often lumped together with AI, is human-computer interaction. I think whose central question initially was, can we make computers easier to use for humans? Okay, but that question has become wider in the sense that now we ask, can computers understand and collaborate with humans? And a popular book on the topic of how to design computers to work well with people, or how to design things that people can use effectively, is a book called The Psychology of Everyday Things, sometimes called The Design of Everyday Things by Donald Norman, who later went on to Apple to design their systems. And that's probably why some Apple stuff is very easy to use. So HCI can probably be thought of as computer science plus psychology, where we need to understand humans to build better computer systems for them. There are now, thanks to things like virtual reality and augmented reality, more interesting questions, like how will large-scale virtual reality affect humans? If you spend your time in the Facebook metaverse, what is going to happen? I think bad things personally, but this is what we study, So that's about the three main areas of computer science at Rochester: theory, systems, and AI and HCI. What I would like to do next is talk about possibilities of careers in computer science. And this list is ordered by, the number of opportunities available. So industry has the most number of opportunities, both in tech industry, which is things like Google, Microsoft, Facebook, and these companies, Amazon, and even non-tech companies that obviously use computing. So things like financial companies, banks, companies like that. There are also careers in research labs, both as engineers and researchers. And finally, if you go into graduate school, there's also opportunities in academia. Okay. At this point, if you're thinking that you like CS, but you really like another engineering field a lot more, well, good for you. That is an excellent thing to have. But I will point out that you can still do CS because nearly all scientific fields have a computational aspect, okay? Where instead of performing experiments in a lab, you perform those experiments in a computer because you usually cannot perform such experiments in the lab. And if you want to study how, for example, plasma heats up when lasers shine into it, you could do that experimentally, but if you want to study and look at what's happening, you really have to build a program to do it. And so you have these different computational fields: computational neuroscience, computational biology, computational physics, computational linguistics, and even the digital humanities, where humanities scholars are using computer science to unearth new perspectives on their field. So you don't have to be a computer scientist to use computers or to do computation. Many other fields will definitely give you the ability to do it. And finally, my last slide, I will point out that I did not have enough time today. In fact, we are a little bit over time to cover everything we offer here. So we do have new professors in data management. We do games and graphics. We do parallel and distributed computing and many more. There are also student groups, the CS undergraduate group, the UR WICMIC group, where you can find peers and other like-minded people to study computer science with. So with that, I'll conclude and take any questions you may have.
One of the questions that we have is what type of work can someone do with a BA in computer science versus a BS?
Okay, so the BA is extremely flexible. So when we ask people to take a BA, they need to specify which courses they're going to be taking, right? So those courses can actually point to careers in computer science. So for example, if you specialize in a track on game development, then that's something you can definitely go and do. Okay, if you specialize in a track for web development, so you can go and do the web development thing. So the BA and the BS have overlap on the same core courses, for example, programming and so on. So it is quite possible for a BA student to do, the same job as a BS student. Okay, they may not necessarily have all the background that a BS student has, though, because a BS just requires more out of you. Okay, so for example, we require our BS students to take 2 core courses in each of theory, systems, and AI. But we only require our BS students to take 2 core courses. So that's how it kind of is more flexible. Okay, so it's essentially no difference. Okay, as long as you choose your path well.
What is the next big wave in computer science?
If I knew, I don't know, I would be here. So the next big wave differs for a researcher and for a practitioner, because practitioners are seeing what researchers have been working on like 5 years ago. So right now, obviously, there's a huge wave in AI, artificial intelligence. It's already well underway, and it is solid enough that I think it will continue for a few more years. We do have a lot of enthusiasm for quantum computing that's coming up, but this enthusiasm is very much in the research world and just about making it to cutting edge industries. So it's not everywhere like AI, but it might actually become something maybe 5 years down the line. Okay, it won't replace conventional computing, but it will give us new tools to tackle old problems. So for example, on a classical computer like this, to search a list that contains 10 elements, in the worst case, takes 10 units of time because you have to look at everything, right? On a quantum computer, it only takes 3 units of time. Okay, which is like the square root of the list. And that's one of the weird parts about quantum computing. So quantum computing is definitely up there. There are things like augmented reality, virtual reality, things like that. But they're not what you will call foundational changes. Okay. But we definitely prepare you for everything. Okay, one of the enduring truths in computer science is that it changes so quickly with new stuff coming along that we really teach you to learn new stuff. But by the time something new comes along, you can actually get onto it as well.
So I'm an academic advisor here, and I work with computer science students. And a lot of computer science students, especially first-year students or sophomores, will ask, oh, should I be majoring in computer science or should I be majoring in data science? So how would you, what would you recommend to students that are kind of unsure about the 2 different fields and which one maybe is best for them?
Okay, so the question is, should students choose computer science or data science? And I get asked that question too as an academic advisor. It's extremely important to understand that the two are not interchangeable. Okay, they both use computers. Okay, they both have process a large amount of data in some places, but I would think of data science as, roughly speaking, and my data scientist colleagues are going to hate me for this, statistics people who have learned how to use computers, and computer science who learn to use statistics. That's the way it is. So both of those are essentially the same path, but the perspectives are very different. Data scientists look at a lot of data to find insights in data. Computer scientists use computers to build newer, better computers and so on. So the goals are very different. So what do you want to do in life? That's actually usually the ultimate question. Right? But it is possible to switch from each. Computer science in that sense is broader. It's probably easier to switch from computer science to data science than the other way around, because data science is more specialized at this moment.
One of the things that we find with advising is that students are not used to failure. How is failure a part of computer science?
How is failure a part of computer science? I don't think I have succeeded in a day if I've not failed a dozen times before going to sleep. As a researcher, failure is part and parcel of life. I tell my undergraduate advisees that if you're not failing, you're not trying hard enough. Okay, that's not just motivational. It's people are sitting in a comfort zone where they're not pushing themselves. So you definitely need to handle or learn to handle failure. One of the big problems I see in students is that students are high achieving, high performers, and they come here and they meet other high achievers, other performers, and then suddenly things are all different for everybody. And some students adapt, some students don't. So I would just encourage students to seek support. It's normal to fail because it's hard. Okay, these are hard things. And with proper support, they can get back on their feet and Okay.
So I'm thinking maybe this is, oh, here we go.
I was.
Well, everyone is reverberating. I'm not sure if I'm reverberating or even if I'm being heard. But I'm going to suggest this was a really informative talk. Maybe the computer gods are telling us that this is the moment to wrap up here, though. So again, we'd really like to thank you, Professor Pai, for giving this presentation. I'm sure if there are questions out there, they can send them in, and we'd be happy to try to get them answered. Nick, if you don't want me to do this, you can do this. Otherwise, we'll terminate here, and we'll thank everyone for attending.